What's going on, everybody? We have to talk about Sphere 3D. They just gave their earnings, so we're going to look over their numbers there. We're also going to look over the chart, and we also have some pretty big Bitcoin news. We have a state buying Bitcoin to the tune of nearly $100 million. So we're going to check out that news. We're also going to look at Bitcoin on the chart. If you guys get something useful out of this, make sure you like, subscribe, ring the notification bell. Check out the links down below for some free stocks and cryptos, and let's look over this Bitcoin news first. And it was reported that the state of Wisconsin bought nearly $100 million worth of Bitcoin. The state's investment board bought 94,562,000 shares of BlackRock's IBIT. Along with their purchases of IBIT, they also bought GBTC to the tune of $64 million. And here's something interesting by Eric Balchunas. Normally you don't get these big fish institutions in the 13Fs for a year or so once these ETFs get more liquidity. But these Bitcoin ETFs are no ordinary launch. This is a good sign. Expect more as institutions tend to move in herds. Now, the investment herd, or better yet, the investment board, also known as SWIB, not to be confused with swim, someone who isn't me. Well, this investment board was founded in 1951, and they currently manage more than $156 billion in assets. This board manages the holdings of the Wisconsin Retirement System, WRS, the State Investment Fund, the SIF, and other state trust funds. And there may be more announcements of this on the horizon. The market is watching these disclosures to see if any large TradFi funds invested in the Bitcoin spot ETFs since their launch earlier this year. Keep in mind, this news was going over something that happened recently. It isn't like they literally just bought today, and the market isn't really reacting to this news. Bitcoin is slightly down today. Miners are seeing a mixed day here. Some are up, some are down. I'm still watching Bitcoin's inverse head and shoulders. If we break the 100 EMA, we might likely invalidate this pattern and come to test our previous low here in the 56,000 range. Along with the 50 EMA that I showed you guys in a past video, I am watching the EMAs as well. We're facing resistance on the 50 EMA, and we're attempting to hold the 100 EMA as support. We are sandwiched between them. I think a break of either one will cause an initial reaction in that direction. Meaning a break of the 50 EMA brings us to test our descending resistance, potentially break out of this downtrend we've been stuck in. It could also bring us to test our 50 EMA right at about $65,000. We have previously found it as resistance. Hopefully a successful break of the 50 EMA brings us a break of this descending resistance and a potential test of the 50 EMA. And while the 50 EMA is now curling down, we are still facing ascending 100 and 200 EMAs. A good break over our 50 EMA will prevent us from seeing these EMAs cross. We don't want to see that. And I am keeping an eye on the Heikin-Ashi candles. If you're curious about how to get to these, on TradingView you simply go up here to the candlesticks and you go down to Heikin-Ashi. But this gives you a good idea of the trend. And on the daily, Heikin-Ashi shows that we are starting a potential uptrend. And lately when we have seen this, we have seen a little bit of a continuation. We might get a couple more green bars and a potential break of this pattern. The last times we have seen a flip to green on the Heikin-Ashis, we have gotten anywhere from 4 to 6 green candles before seeing red again. Hopefully the trend keeps up here. The Heikin-Ashis on the weekly though say that we are still continuing down. Now, one thing I wanted to show you guys that we saw somewhat recently is we did see the 200 MA break new all-time highs, higher than the last cycle. In the last cycle, we saw the 200 MA get all the way up to about 49,000, nearly 50,000, and we recently saw the 200 MA finally break over its previous all-time high. I do think while we are under the 50 MA, we are going to hold up this 200 MA. We aren't going to see a death cross until later in this cycle, and I want to show you guys in the last halving cycle. Here was the halving right here. Here was our last golden cross until we went and set a death cross in 2021. I expect a similar scenario here. We saw our final golden cross back in October of 2023, and I suspect we aren't going to see a death cross until sometime in 2025. And for those of you that don't know, a golden cross is when the 50 breaks over the 200 MA. A death cross is when the 50 breaks under the 200 MA. Currently the 50 is well over the 200 MA. The 200 MA is trending up. The price is above the 200 MA. However, the price is under a declining 50 MA. We did see this a few months ago where Bitcoin broke under the 50 MA. It was under there for a good week or two before it finally broke over, and we went on an epic run once we got above that 50 MA again. I do think a break of our 50 MA will bring Bitcoin to test its all-time highs. Next up, I wanted to get into Sphere 3D's earnings. Looking over some highlights, their revenue increased to $6.9 million during the quarter ended March 31 of 2024. This is year-over-year growth. However, sequentially, they did see a dip in revenue. Their Bitcoin mined during the quarter was 144.8 Bitcoin. Of course, compared to something like a CleanSpark, compared to Amara, those are multi-billion-dollar companies. Sphere 3D is in the tens of millions. So keep that in mind. You know, you can't really compare it to a much larger market cap Bitcoin miner. Sphere 3D entered the quarter with 1.3 exahash per second. We saw in their last mining update that's where they were at, so we didn't really see any growth there as of recently. But we do have some comments from the CEO indicating we might see some future efficiency increase, potentially exahash increase. As we move past the first quarter of 2024 and the Bitcoin halving, we're proactively strategizing for Sphere 3D's future growth. During 2024, we intend to refresh a significant portion of our fleet with newer gen machines to bolster our efficiency. We expect this to lead to greater gross profits, given that more efficient machines typically use less power and generate more Bitcoin. We expect to start the process of moving the older machines during the second quarter and to begin replacing them with newer generation machines, continuing in a phased approach over the remainder of the year. So they should be switching these machines off as we speak. We'll see the effects of this in the next mining update. But going over some of their financial results, they did see a nice growth in revenue year over year, but like I mentioned, quarter over quarter, we did see a little decline. But year over year, they have a 130% increase in revenue. Their operating costs and expenses for the quarter were 8.8 million. Just from the operating costs alone, you can see that they're obviously not making a profit. Their operating costs are higher than their revenue, and that's not even getting into other expenses. Their digital mining revenue is becoming a bigger and bigger portion of their business, and we did have recent news that they're cutting away their old segment of their business, which should help their efficiency, should help their margins. But their digital mining revenue increased 175% for the first quarter from the first quarter of 2023. Their depreciation and amortization was 1.8 million compared to 1 million in the quarter a year ago. Their net loss decreased from 3.7 million in the first quarter of 2023 to 1.9 million. But the fact that it's the quarter that we're in, they're very unlikely to see a profitable quarter until much later in the cycle, similar to Bitfarms. Whereas we had other miners posting profitability this quarter and the previous quarter. Like I've said, Sphere 3D is a very high risk miner, very small market cap, still operating at a loss. But we're talking about a company around $20 million in market cap. This is priced so cheap because of potential failure. This is priced so cheap because they're continuing to burn cash. They're not seeing a profitable quarter. To me, the risk is worth the reward. In my opinion, when Bitcoin runs, when Bitcoin goes on to create new all-time highs later this year, I do believe a stock like Sphere 3D will see some added hype, and it really doesn't take a lot of money to see something like this move. For instance, today Sphere 3D is up around 8%, and honestly, the earnings is somewhat of a mixed bag. Their net loss was 4.5 million compared to a net loss of 3.5 million in the previous year. They also have an unrealized loss of 2.7 million. This is because of their core settlement. They received $10 million worth of core shares. So while their Bitcoin mining revenue did grow, they are still operating at a loss. Their operating costs are growing along with their Bitcoin mining revenue. And it's really a matter of, is this company going to finally break past their expenses? I do think this comes later in the cycle, towards the tail end, similar to last cycle where we saw a few Bitcoin miners posting profits at the end. I do think we're going to see Sphere 3D post a profit at the end of this cycle. One thing to think about is these small cap stocks don't necessarily have to be posting a profit. We can still see a lot of hype enter them. Speculation will take its course. As we get closer and closer to the end of this year, as Bitcoin hopefully grows in price, this will help them tighten up their losses. People will speculate that this company is getting closer and closer to profitability. And the fact that down the road they might be getting closer to profitability, I can see some hype drawing into Sphere 3D. Keep in mind, they did just receive nearly half their market cap in core stock, $10 million. But one thing you got to be aware of is we are going to see dilution. This company needs to dilute to survive. They're not making a profit. They're either going to have to take out high interest rate debt or they're going to have to dilute shares. And we have seen some dilution. Year over year, they have introduced around 5-6 million shares. This honestly isn't anything out of the ordinary. Keep in mind, the last Bitcoin cycle, one of the most dilutive stocks was CleanSpark. And where did that get them? Well, in my opinion, they're on their way to become the largest Bitcoin miner in America. In my opinion, they are going to surpass Mara. So while dilution is of course a negative for shareholders, you have to realize that these unprofitable Bitcoin miners do need to survive. Their survival is more important than your shares getting diluted if you're a shareholder. Of course, if you're playing Bitcoin miners short term, you don't want to hear about dilution. But if you're looking at them as a company, if you're looking at their survival, you might be okay with some dilution. We also had news at the end of last year that they terminated their service agreement with Griffin, returning 22.5% to the company's gross margin. On January 23 of 2024, the company received 2 million shares of Core Scientific. And if you're wondering why they're already at a loss for their Core Scientific shares, well, they received these shares right here, the beginning of January. Core is lower than that price. Now, one thing about Core Scientific is while their earnings did come out pretty good, they beat top and bottom line, they saw a profit, they beat EPS by a huge margin, they beat revenue by 20%. The problem here lies in their upcoming earnings estimate. They expect a loss, they expect a huge drop in revenue. Some miners are expecting growth in revenue even with the halving taking effect. Core is expecting a pretty large loss in revenue, or decrease in revenue quarter over quarter. If Core does good, Sphere 3D's core shares do good, obviously. So if you're a Sphere 3D holder, you should be rooting for Core. Doesn't hurt to keep an eye on Core's chart. We did see a little bit of a push on their earnings. Their earnings was good, but we're facing our previous resistance here. This roughly $4 area. We are finding resistance there. If we can break over 4, this will be great for Core and Sphere 3D. It does look like we're gearing up for a potential breakout in either direction. We're either going to break up over this 4 or we're going to break down. Maybe we get another bounce off of it just to kind of confirm this trend. And then towards the end of May, beginning of June, we get either a breakout to the upside or downside. Now looking at Sphere 3D, this has been in a rough downtrend. The halving coming in, taking half the rewards. Bitcoin miners have been tanking. Sphere 3D even more so. It is still up from its lows. It's not creating new 52-week lows, which is good, but it looks like it's working towards taking all of its gains from the bear market low. It is still up 30-40%, but compared to other miners, that is pretty weak. There's many other miners that are up 300-400% from the bear market lows. There's miners like CleanSpark and Mara right around 10x from their lows. The market sees that Sphere 3D is extremely high risk. The market sees that with miners taking half the rewards, this should really hurt Sphere 3D as a business, along with the other miners. But I think the market is ignoring that Bitcoin should rally over the rest of this year and throughout part of 2025. Bitcoin breaking its downtrend, Bitcoin finally going to create new 52-week highs, create all-time highs. This is what the market needs to believe a little bit more in Sphere 3D and these riskier Bitcoin miners. Right now, these are performing the worst and no one wants any part in them. After the halving's taken effect, people are going for the more efficient miners. But I think even here, Sphere 3D still offers a great opportunity. It is very high risk. It is not worth your whole portfolio. It is not worth 10% of your portfolio, in my opinion. It is worth a small percentage of your overall portfolio of Bitcoin miners to speculate and say, hey, this small $20 million, $25 million market cap company, this can really run on some Bitcoin hype. But it's a matter of Bitcoin breaking its downtrend, Sphere 3D finally breaking its downtrend. If you don't own this yet, I would wait for this to bottom out. I would wait for this to break its descending resistance, test these moving averages. But yeah, right now the chart looks ugly. We're clearly in a downtrend. It's a matter of breaking out this descending resistance. It's a matter of bottoming out, starting to push higher, create higher lows and higher highs. So far, it's nothing but lower highs and lower lows. We need to see a change in this trend. Until then, if you don't hold this yet, I probably wouldn't touch it. What am I doing, being that I'm a holder right now? Well, I'm waiting to see it bottom out. But it really depends on your goal of accumulation. How much shares do you want? Are you concerned with seeing it bottom out? Are you confident that Sphere 3D will make a recovery? Do you think it's going to hold up its previous lows? If so, maybe now's a good time to buy. Otherwise, you might want to wait for it to bottom out, show signs of a reversal. But what do you guys think about Sphere 3D's earnings results? It would have been really nice to see their exahash increase. It's still stuck at 1.3. Hopefully with them switching out some of these machines, we see their exahash increase. At the very least, we see their efficiency go up. And also, what do you think about this report seeing the first state buying Bitcoin? While 100 million isn't necessarily going to move the needle much, this is what we want to see. We want to see these large funds starting to dip their toes into Bitcoin, and we are seeing it. But let me know what you think this means. Does this mean we see more states reporting that they have been buying Bitcoin as more of these 13Fs get released? Do we find out that more corporations, more big companies are buying Bitcoin? I think the next couple of weeks will be very interesting. We will hear of more and more people buying Bitcoin that we didn't expect. But let me know what you think about that. Let me know what you think about Sphere 3D. Are you buying the fear? Are you avoiding the fear? Are you waiting for better times? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks as always for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.